This is a comment made by series director Shigeo Komori in a December 2009 Famitsu interview, when asked about the theming choice behind the then newly announced Seikaiju no Maiku 3 Seikai no Reihosha, which is what we now know as Etrian Odyssey III The Drowned City. To this day, Etrian Odyssey III is still among the most unique titles in the series. Its unique setting and classes were just two of many things about the game that appealed to fans, including myself. I first played Etrian Odyssey III many years ago, as I imported the North American release. However, I couldn't complete the game back then due to its high difficulty, and I shelved it. I remember loving it, and I always wanted to go back and complete it. And given Atlus's attempts to make the Etrian series more accessible, on top of their tendency to remake games in general, I figured a port or remake would happen. And it finally has! With the release of the HD Remaster Collection for the Switch and PC, I decided to go back and complete this unique game. Let's get straight into it. Etrian Odyssey III was released for the Nintendo DS on the 1st of April 2010 in Japan, and later that year on the 21st of September in North America. Like many older Atlus games from the time, it never came out in Europe at all. It's a first-person dungeon crawler RPG that capped off the original DS trilogy of Etrian Odyssey titles, and is the only one not to receive a full Untold remake on the 3DS. As for the game itself, Etrian Odyssey III is set in the port city of Armoroad, a seaside paradise on an island in the middle of the ocean. However, it has a mysterious past, because half of Armoroad literally sank under the waves 100 years ago as part of the Calamity. You must explore the Yggdrasil labyrinth behind the city and find the Deep City, which is the name given to the portion of Armoroad that sank 100 years ago. This game has a bit more story than that, but overall that's the basic premise of it. Armoroad has a wide variety of characters you will meet throughout your time in this world. Notable characters you meet early on include Flaudia, the elderly representative of Armoroad's monarchy, who you accept tasks from at the Senators. There's also Missy, the barmaid of the Butterfly Bistro, who shares a unique way of speaking that continues to enthrall fans all these years later. There's also Olympia, a mysterious woman you meet early in the game who initially seems quite helpful to you. The most popular character of Etrian Odyssey III though is Napier, who is basically the Mr. Krabs of the Etrian Odyssey series. Her charming stinginess made her so popular, she ended up upping sticks and moving to Lemuria, the island world that appears in Etrian Odyssey Nexus. I also have a custom theme of it on my hacked 3DS by the way, and I'm sure Nintendo is a massive fan of that. Of all the characters in the series, the batch of characters you meet in Etrian Odyssey III are among my favourites. They all have their own unique personalities and quirks that are conveyed extremely well through the text, as well as the fantastic artwork by series illustrator Yuji Himukai. This game has no dub at all, so their characterization lives almost exclusively through the text, akin to the classic RPGs Etrian Odyssey III is a throwback to. It succeeds tremendously in this regard. Like all Etrian Odyssey games, this is a first-person dungeon crawling RPG similar to classics like Wizardry, the original Phantasy Star, as well as more modern takes like Stranger of Sword City, The Lost Child, and of course, Dungeon Travelers. You make your own cast based on static portraits, assign their classes, I will come back to this, and then go out into the Yggdrasil labyrinth to find the Deep City. Once you find the Deep City, events happen that force you to descend further into the labyrinth. Each of the first 5 stratums in this game has 4 floors, which is one less than in other entries in the series. The last stratum does have 5 floors, which is akin to most other mainline Etrians. Each stratum has its own unique theme, and in Etrian Odyssey III's case, is one of the most diverse games across the entire franchise in this regard. First stratum is the Wonderful Wood, which serves as this Etrian Odyssey's forest-themed first stratum. The next stratum is the Undersea Grotto, an underwater-themed dungeon that humans can breathe in and walk around like normal, as well as be blown around by various aquatic currents. Ah, video games, where half of your environments don't have to make sense to be fun. There's also the Molten Caves, the only lava-themed stratum in the entire series, and has an intense atmosphere to match, putting aside the fact the lava looks more like honey for some reason. It looks gorgeous though. Next up is the Abyssal Shrine, an undersea temple that clearly inspired dungeons in future Etrians, such as Ganuga Gap from Etrian Odyssey II, and the entire second half of Etrian Odyssey IV. The fifth stratum is the Porcelain Forest, a beautiful Japanese-inspired dungeon that concludes the core story, as that's where many of the major boss battles happen. It's easily my favourite dungeon to play through, especially at night, putting aside all those gate puzzles, which, yeah, that's a thing. Finally, there is the Cyclopean Haunt, which has an eerily creepy atmosphere with various tentacles sticking out from the walls. It's the deepest part of the labyrinth and is home to the Abyssal God, aka Etrian Odyssey III's Superboss. Battles themselves are turn-based and take place from a first-person perspective, enabling you to battle static portraits of monsters of all kinds. Yep, as Etrian Odyssey was originally a Nintendo DS game, this came before 3D models became the norm. They are well-drawn portraits and they do look even better in HD. That aside, the battles are random encounters and they can be brutally hard if you're not prepared. You can use physical attacks, magical attacks, ailments, binds, and more to weaken the various monsters you fight in the labyrinth. These monsters also have their same skills at disposal, so you must constantly be on your guard in the Yggdrasil labyrinth. A series staple is the FOEs, which are basically the do not fight when you first encounter them enemies. They appear on the map as massive circles, basically the equivalent of the sun, and have their own patterns that you need to decipher and avoid on the map. Many times throughout your adventure, you've got to find a way to get past the FOEs. If you've played previous Etrian games, you'll be able to adjust quite nicely. However, the lack of 3D models in the original DS trilogy does add an extra element of challenge, as you must then rely on the minimap to see the direction they are facing. Speaking of the minimap, I haven't touched on the map making yet. For those who don't know, the core mechanic of the Etrian series is to draw maps of your dungeon, adding an element of cartography. Because I played the HD remaster of the game, which plays much closer to a typical dungeon RPG, this plays differently compared to the DS original, but really utilises the DS's touchscreen. I recommend checking out my Etrian Odyssey introduction and recommendation video comparing the recent remasters to the original DS releases, as well as the 3DS versions of 1 and 2. These versions control so differently, and to avoid repeating myself, I won't discuss that much here. However, I will say this, the flexibility of the Nintendo Switch allows you to play the game docked or portable, hence I finally played an Etrian Odyssey game on the big screen. Now, I've always wanted to try this for a while, as a massive fan of the series. I really wish Atlas ported some of the Etrian games to the Wii U back when that console existed. Yep, when the Wii U was a massive stinker, it was the perfect console for Etrian Odyssey. They would have worked extremely well using the Wii U gamepad as the bottom screen where you draw the map. It's the closest we would have gotten to a core Etrian Odyssey experience on a home console using two screens. While I haven't tried it myself, it's possible to play an Etrian 3DS game this way by hacking your Wii U, but I digress. Either way, that's why playing Etrian on the big screen was such a big deal. I love playing it this way, and this is how I spent much of my playthrough. Being able to sit for hours in front of the big screen with a conventional controller, playing this RPG epic makes for incredibly lengthy play sessions, and is so much fun. And it's also fun because there are so many ways that Etrian Odyssey III is unique. Let's discuss those now. First off, I've got to talk about the new classes. Etrian Odyssey III is the first game in the series to fully revamp the classes so that every class available is brand new. The most notable addition, and my personal favourite class across the entire series, is the Sovereign, or Prince/Princess, in the original DS release, and in all Japanese versions of the games. You know, that cumbersome phrasing actually proves why using gender-neutral naming where possible is a good thing. But anyway, the Sovereign is a versatile support class that can use buffs and debuffs, add magical weapon enhancements, and more. Other classes include the Buccaneer, aka the pirate class who can use guns. There's also the Monk, a primary healing class that can fight and heal equally as effectively, which is very rare in RPGs more generally. Others include the Wildling, which is a class that can summon animals, as well as the Farmer, whom are great with dungeon exploration outside of battle. In fact, some of these classics were so popular, they returned to Etrian Odyssey Nexus later on, including the Sovereign and the Monk. Additionally, there are two unlockable classes, the Shogun and the Yggdroid. These classes are unlocked depending on which ending you pursue within Etrian Odyssey III. Speaking of endings, there are multiple endings within Etrian Odyssey III. This feature doesn't appear in any other Etrian game, including the Untold games that have an actual story mode. When you get to the Deep City, you will soon discover a lot of important plot information, including why the city sank under the waves, and the ideological differences between Armoroad and the Deep City. Then once you encounter Kujira in a certain scene on the 11th floor, you must select a choice on which side you align with. Do you align with Armoroad, the city you ventured out from, or do you align with the Deep City, the city you found? If you align with Armoroad, you get the Porcelain Wish ending. Choosing the Armoroad mission in the 3rd Stratum after the choice with Kujira will unlock the Shogun class upon you completing it. Whereas if you side with the Deep City, you get the Abyssal Desire ending, and unlock the Yggdrasil class for completing their mission in Stratum 3 instead. Both these paths lead to different missions, as well as different bosses at the end of multiple Stratums. Doing both endings is vital to fully understanding the story of Etrian Odyssey III. Plus you can get some fantastic boss fights while seeing certain characters in a whole new light. Finally, there is a 3rd ending called the Eldest Path. This is the hardest ending to unlock, but it's also the true ending for both stories, where you break off one of the other endings onto a more neutral path, where you side with neither Armoroad nor the Deep City, rather you aim to truly resolve the conflict. To get onto this ending, you must meet certain requirements to make something called the Porcelain Offering, which you can then use to truly resolve the conflict. By extension, the themes of picking a side is a core theme of the game, much more than you think. From main characters like Kujira and Olympia directly addressing you about it, to even NPCs detached from the main story like the captain of Inver Port asking you directly about it. You can feel the presence of ideological conflict in this world, even though it doesn't normally show, and tends to show more through conventional storytelling with a set cast, like in the Untold games, and that's really good world design right there. It also reflects the reality of ideological divisions in that through major conflicts, there are often two sides to every story, usually in the case of real world wars and geopolitics, which I'm sure is something we all know very well. You see how characters are willing to fight to death for their cause to the point where it's admirable. The multiple endings really elevate character development in a way not seen in other entries since, and I'd love Atlus to return to this idea in a future title. Speaking of Invert Port, this is the hub for ocean exploration within Etrian Odyssey III. This is some of the best content in the entire game, arguably even more so than typical side quests. In this side mode, you must restore Armoroad's trade connections to the various towns on neighbouring islands in both the South and the North Seas. You take your ship on voyages to nearby islands, mapping the terrain while completing other side missions. An early mission you get, for example, is to find a discreet way to reach a lighthouse off the west coast so you can defeat the giant bird who has occupied it and now calls it home. In fact, the more I talk about this mode, the more it begins to resemble the airship overworld from Etrian Odyssey IV. Yep, that's because this ship exploration feature in Etrian Odyssey III is the foundation for the airship exploration from Etrian Odyssey IV. In Etrian Odyssey IV, which, given it was on the Nintendo 3DS, you're more likely to have played it, you're mapping the overworld in between each stratum and the locations of all the mini labyrinths and FOEs, etc. It's vastly different from most Etrians because they only focus on the core labyrinths within Yggdrasil. It truly brings the world of Etrian Odyssey IV to life and is an integral part of the core story as well. However, in Etrian Odyssey III, this mode is entirely optional and is easily missed by players who only want to focus on completing the core story and Yggdrasil Labyrinth. While I appreciate and respect that perspective, you're missing out on so much of this game's content by not exploring the surrounding ocean. Plus, some quests can only be completed by sailing the seas, so you'll need to do this to get 100%. Also, this side mode is where the classic End of the Raging Waves theme first appeared, and later returned in both Etrian Odyssey 4 and 5 because players love it so much. While I'm on the topic of the music, I'll address this out because there are unique aspects to the music as well. Yuzo Koshiro returns as the series composer, and this was the last soundtrack in the game to exclusively use an FM synth composed on a PC-88. This music is unique because it's based on a slightly different sound font to the rest of the series FM synth. I find it difficult to describe because I'm not familiar with the PC-88, it's kind of before my time, and also Japan only. However, even the most casual listener can tell that the sound font choice for Etrian Odyssey III's FM synth is slightly different compared to every other game in the series, and I honestly prefer it. It's more atmospheric than other series FM synths. You get Stratum and town melodies that sound like bells or pianos, whereas battle themes sound closer to the more rock-themed OST that you see in similar games, like it's just trying to burst free of the limitations of the old PC-88, but the fact it's even comparable in the first place is a huge achievement. In a way, I'm kinda glad there's no complete Untold-esque OST for Etrian Odyssey III, because I think many would overlook this badass soundtrack if an orchestrated version was done. We got a taste of what the revamped Etrian Odyssey III soundtrack in both the Etrian Odyssey Nexus as well as the Etrian Mystery Dungeon titles, although not so much Etrian Mystery Dungeon 2 because that was never released overseas. Atlus, you make terrible decisions. And as fantastic as they are, the original versions still rank among the best versions. In fact, Yuzo Koshiro himself recently said in an interview the music for the Magma Cave Stratum is among his personal favourite compositions across the entire series, and it's one of mine too. Wait, Etrian Odyssey III has multiplayer? Yes it does, and you can access it directly from the port. As part of the various quests you can do within the Ocean Exploration mode, you can team up with other allies to participate in these ocean battles over the internet. That said, if you play solo like a lot of RPG fans, you can team up with in-game AI characters instead for these battles. It's a cool feature, and I'm glad that Atlus experimented like this. It's kind of like the town development feature from Etrian Odyssey II Untold in a way, although much like that town development feature, I'm not surprised it's not returned in a future Etrian title. There are other DS RPGs that experimented with multiplayer modes, most notably Dragon Quest IX, which came out several months before Etrian Odyssey III, and that mode in comparison was far more fleshed out. However, in that case, it was the latest entry within the Dragon Quest series, which is effectively Japan's national video game, so naturally it had to have a greater aspect of a multiplayer. Additionally, the primary nature of the Etrian Odyssey series, a comparatively more hardcore and niche dungeon RPG series, means I'd argue multiplayer just doesn't have the widest appeal within Etrian Odyssey. I personally don't really care much for it. That said, as the series is now on the Nintendo Switch and PC, I think it might be worth revisiting this idea in a future Etrian game. Now Nintendo has an internet connection system that's fit for purpose, as well as cross-platform compatibility with PC via Steam. One of the more noteworthy features added here, but returned in future entries, is the guild card system. If you've played any mainline Etrian Odyssey game on the 3DS, you will already know what this is. You can share details about your guild on this card with other players around the internet. As the original DS version came out before the days of Street Pass, this feature used the old Nintendo Wi-Fi connection, whereas the new Switch and PC releases use typical Wi-Fi. It was a cool way of using antiquated tech. There are two more features I want to discuss before moving on to my conclusion, and they are subclassing and limits. First off, subclassing became another series staple and is arguably the most important feature added in Etrian Odyssey III. After reaching the Deep City, you receive this reward from the Abyssal King, where you can assign another class to your characters for them to learn skills from. This diversifies the skills and options available in battle that allow you to cover more bases when fighting tricky bosses. I strongly recommend using this feature, and I'm glad it returns in some form in future entries, whether that be outright subclassing or the Grimoire Stones, even though the Grimoire Stones absolutely suck. Limits are another feature that have since become standard within the series, allowing you to assign certain skills to your characters for them to use in battle. Like subclassing, it can increase the options available to you in battle, plus it can save a bit of MP by using limits instead of spells, which can make all the difference in those tricky boss fights. To conclude, I had an absolute blast going back to and finishing Etrian Odyssey III. This is easily among the best titles in the entire series because of how it innovated on the already winning Etrian formula, with many of its innovations like skilled cards and subclassing becoming series staples. Its unique features mean the game has aged even better than its other two DS counterparts. Plus, Etrian Odyssey III still offers a lot to series veterans, especially those who have only played the 3DS titles. The multiple endings alone lead to multiple playthroughs, adding great replay value on top of character development done in a way no other title has replicated. I really hope one day Etrian Odyssey III gets a full Untold-esque remake. It needs it the most out of all the games in the series, plus there's a lot of potential to expand the lore of Armoroad and the Deep City, especially because, once again, the multiple endings. Do I recommend playing this game? Absolutely! You can buy the HD remaster on the Switch or on Steam separately, or as part of an overpriced digital bundle of all three HD remastered Etrian games. You can also import the Asian English physical edition for Nintendo Switch. There is also the Nintendo DS original, but that is among the most expensive DS games nowadays, and it also lacks the quality of life features found in the newer Etrian games and the HD remasters. It's still a good version of the game if you can find it for a reasonable price though, or you can just emulate it for the cost of nothing. Like the ocean waves of the southern seas that inspired it, Etrian Odyssey III is beautiful to look at, relaxing to listen to, and crafts the most beautiful memories the more you immerse yourself in it. It represents the pinnacle of the series when it first came out, and still does to this day. It represents some of the best dungeon crawling gameplay currently available on a handheld, and that is something that, like waves, will never stop enthralling those captivated by its unique features. Hello, and thank you for getting to the end of another retrospective video. I used footage that I recorded from a trip to Wales a few months ago in the intro and outro, so I hope you like the extra pizzazz I've done there. As for upcoming retrospective videos, I might take a little break because this one has exhausted me, but I definitely plan to do Jack Jian, which is an Otome game, at some point next couple of months. And I want to try to do another RPG one. I haven't decided yet, other than it's not good from Atlas, just because I've done two already. Thank you so much for listening, watching, enjoying. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell. Check the description for donation bins, etc. Thank you so much. Bye bye.